Hello and welcome to How to Pass the Police and PCSO Written Tests. My name's Richard McMunn, and for the duration of this DVD I'm going to be showing you how to drastically increase your chances of success during this particular stage of the police and PCSO selection process. Now, before I begin, make sure you grab yourself a pen and a piece of paper and take a note of the important hints and tips that I'll be providing you throughout the duration of this program. Now let's get started and take a look at some important hints, tips and advice that will allow you to prepare effectively for the police and PCSO written tests. Now, during this first section of the program, I'm going to provide you with some important tips that will allow you to prepare effectively for the police and PCSO written tests, which form part of the assessment centre process. Now, when you attend the assessment centre, as you probably well know, you're going to be required to carry out two written reports or proposals that are based around issues and events that have occurred at what is called the Westshire Centre. Now, before I actually go into these important tips, what I would advise you do is, as I said at the beginning, is get a pen and a piece of paper, take down some hints, and I would also recommend that you have a copy of the Westshire Centre pack and also a copy of the core competencies that are relevant to the role of a police officer and a PCSO. Now, these two pieces of information, the Westshire Centre pack and the core competencies, are crucial to your success, and I'll come on to that in a second. Now, obviously, before you go along to the assessment centre, you should do lots of practice. That is what is important. Only you will know how much preparation you need to do. You need to ask yourself the question, what are you like at writing reports or proposals or letters? What's your grammar, your punctuation and your spelling like? So the assessors during the selection process are looking for you to create a concise and relevant report which is based around the question that it actually asks you. So I will provide details of how you can achieve that throughout this program. So let's first of all take a look at the police officer core competencies that are relevant to the role. Now, I strongly advise that you get a copy of these and you go through them and use the tips that I'm going to provide you with today. Now, what I would do if I was preparing now to go along to the police officer selection process is I would grab myself a highlighter marker. Now, this will become apparent as I go through the core competencies why it is important to do this. Now, as I've already mentioned, you're going to be assessed against the police officer core competencies. Now, before we come on to the section which actually relates to structuring your report, your proposal or your letter, you have to know the core competencies. If you don't know the core competencies, then you won't be able to use what I call keywords and phrases that will allow you to match them comfortably. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's assessing your proposal document, he or she will be looking for you to match the core competencies. And of course, how do you do that? You use keywords and phrases that are relevant to those core competencies. So in effect, you're making it a lot easier for the person who's assessing your report or your proposal document. So let's go through them in detail. So the first one that I'm going to look at is that of community and customer focus. And it says here that you can focus on the customer and provide a high quality service that is tailored to meet their individual needs. You provide a high level of service to customers, maintains contact with customers and works out what they need in order to respond to them. Now, whilst you might not be providing a report for a customer, it will be someone like the centre manager or someone of an appropriate level within the working environment of the Westshire Centre. So I'm going to go through these core competencies and I'm going to actually highlight some key words. So one of the areas that forms under the core competency of community and customer focus is that you actually present an appropriate image. So I'm going to highlight that. So, present an appropriate image. You have to provide a high quality level of service, and you must make sure that you do that when you're creating your report. It says that you focus on the customer in all activities. So you have to focus on the customer. You try to sort out the customer's problems as quickly as possible. Now, when you're creating your report, you can use phrases similar to that, such as, it is important that we sort out the person's problems as soon as possible. By actually including that kind of keyword or phrase within your report writing, you will be matching the relevant core competency that's being assessed. It says here, apologises for mistakes. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that and sorts them out as quickly as possible. So if there's been an error, and say you're having to write a letter to a customer who's complained, then if there was a mistake that the centre had made, you would apologise for it. And you could say, I'm very, very sorry for what's actually happened here, but I can assure you that I will sort out this problem as soon as possible. Again, you'll be matching the core competency that's being assessed. So you're going to respond quickly to the customer's needs. You're going to make sure that the customers are satisfied with the service that they received. So you might want to say in the report, at some point we want to contact the customer to make sure that they're actually happy with what we're providing. Manages customers' expectations and keeps the customer updated on progress. So you could say, if it was a centre manager, you could say, sir, at the end of the actual proposal, you could say, I will keep you updated on progress at all times. So by doing that again, you're starting to match the core competencies. Now, something which I'm going to mention at this stage, we're starting to get into these keywords and phrases and actually learning them and using them in the report writing. These are also very, very good for the interactive exercises, because you will need to learn them as well before you go to the assessment centre. But once you know these, you can use them in just about every stage of the assessment centre process. And then finally, balances customer needs with organisational needs. And you'll need to do that throughout the stage of the report writing proposal process. So that's the core competency of community and customer focus. So we've gone through that and I've highlighted the key words. Now I would learn some of these keywords and phrases that are relevant to each core competency. So when I go along and do my report writing, I know what my role is. You have to provide a very high level of customer service. You also have to balance the needs of the customer with the organisation at the Westshire Centre. So you can use those keywords and phrases within the report writing process. Now, effective communication. Now, even though we're not going to use keywords and phrases out of this core competency, we're going to quickly go through it because this will dictate how you're going to actually communicate in writing when you're creating your written report. So it says communicates ideas and information effectively, both verbally and in writing, which is in this case. Uses language and a style of communication that is appropriate to the situation and the people who are being addressed. So the required level is that you communicate all needs, instructions and decisions clearly. So there's the first clue, and I'm going to highlight that clearly. Your report has to be clear. Now they're not looking for pages and pages and pages of report writing. They're looking for something which is clear and it is concise. So we're not actually looking for quantity here, we're looking for quality, and that's what you should go for. So it says here, deals with issues directly. So when you're writing a proposal or you're dealing with an issue in the report writing process, you must deal with the issue. You need to come up with a proposal or a solution to the problem. Some people go along and they don't actually come up with a solution. In other words, they sit on the fence. Sometimes you can't actually make a decision against the scenario that you're provided with because you don't have enough information. And you may need to say during the written report, we need to first of all obtain further information, but if this was the case, then I would offer this solution. If the case was X, Y, and Z, I would offer another solution. So, but make sure you deal with the issue directly. You clearly communicate. You communicate face-to-face wherever possible, which is relevant to the role-play scenarios. You speak with authority or write with authority and confidence. Remember that you're in a responsible role, which is the Customer Services Officer at the Westshire Centre PAC, which I'm going to come on to in a little while. Manages group discussions effectively, that's not relevant to this situation. Summarises information to check people understand it. Supports arguments and recommendations effectively in writing. So what that is saying is that you support an argument or a recommendation. You're going to make a recommendation or proposal and you can put it across effectively in writing, which is what we're going to do during this programme. Produces well-structured reports and written summaries. Well-structured. I will come on to how you structure the report or how I recommend you do throughout another section of the programme. So that's the core competency of effective communication. Now, personal responsibility. Police officers and PCSOs have to take personal responsibility for sorting out issues and problems. That's what you would expect them to do. If you were walking along the street and you saw somebody carrying out a criminal act and there was a police officer nearby, if you went up to them, you would expect he or she to take personal responsibility for sorting out the issue, and that's what you must do during the report writing exercise. You have to take personal responsibility. So it states here that you take personal responsibility for making things happen. That's what you have to do. You're going to make a decision or a proposal during the written report and make it happen. Takes personal responsibility for own actions. I'm going to highlight that. Takes personal responsibility for own actions and for sorting out issues or problems. So again, I'm going to highlight that. Focused on achieving results to the required standards and developing your own skills and knowledge. So the first positive indicator on the core competency is take personal responsibility. And I would recommend that at some point during the written report, you actually use those three words, take personal responsibility. You could say at the end, let's say that your written report was for the centre manager. I would say at the end, so having provided my recommendations for this situation, I will ensure that I take personal responsibility for solving this and keeping you updated on progress. Again, you're matching the actual relevant core competency. Takes on tasks, uses initiative. So using your initiative, you're going to have to actually think of a solution to the problem. And the only way that you can actually do that is by learning and understanding the Westshire Centre Pack, which I'm going to go through in a little while. Takes action to resolve problems, keeps promises and doesn't let colleagues down. So you're saying you're taking personal responsibility. You follow things through to a satisfactory conclusion. You show enthusiasm when you're actually writing your report and focus on the task. You're open, honest and genuine, standing up for what is right. So there's only a few things there that you could use during the written report, but that's the one that I would strongly recommend, is that you actually include that at some point in your report, that you're going to take personal responsibility for solving this problem. Okay, moving on to the next core competency of problem solving. Going back to a police officer or PCSO's role, he or she have to solve problems. It's part of the role. It's what you would expect a police officer or PCSO to do, is actually solve problems. So the required level is gathers enough relevant information to understand specific issues and events, and uses that information to identify problems and draw logical conclusions and to make good decisions. So the first one is identifies where to get information from. So how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to use the Westshire Centre Pack, or the relevant pack that you're provided with when you're actually creating your written report. You need to know the information within the Westshire Centre Pack. You've got to know it, you've got to understand it, and I strongly advise that you learn this pack before you actually go to the assessment centre. So if you're providing an issue, let's say, which is relevant to assistant dogs within the actual centre, assistance dogs for the blind, therefore you would need to relate it back to the actual code of conduct, which is relevant in the Westshire Centre Pack. So you need to mention the area of where you've actually got that information from. So you can say within the code of conduct, it actually states X, Y and Z. So that is actually solving problems in line with the required standards and the rules that are contained within the Westshire Centre Pack. Gets as much information as is appropriate, separates relevant information from irrelevant information. So say you were dealing with that kind of scenario, again an assistance dog for the blind, you may not need to relate it to the opening hours of the pub in the centre. So you need to separate relevant information from irrelevant information. Takes in information quickly and accurately. Well, as I mentioned, you've only got 20 minutes to actually read the information and carry out your written report, so you need to do it quickly. Reviews all the information, identifies and links causes and effects. So you may have to use the information that is relevant in the Westshire Centre to solve your problem. And remember what I said earlier in relation to personal responsibility. You're not sitting on the fence here, you're going to actually come up with a solution to the problem that is presented to you. Identifies what can and what cannot be changed. You may not be able to do some things in some of the scenarios that you're presented with. Takes a systematic approach to solving problems, remains impartial and avoids jumping to conclusions. So remember, if there's something which may appear to be obvious in in the situation, you first of all need to gather information before you're actually creating your report. Refers to procedures and precedents as necessary before making decisions. So I'm going to highlight that one, and I'm going to say to you that you need to refer to the procedures. So, as I mentioned, if there's something in relation to the code of conduct, for example, say there's some youths running and causing problems in the centre, harassing people, you could make relevance to the Westshire Centre Pack and say that actually youths, as per the code of conduct, this is not acceptable and we won't allow it. If you don't make reference to the information within the Westshire Centre Pack, you're not actually meeting that part of the core competency. So makes good decisions that take into account of all relevant factors that are provided in the situation and the Westshire Centre Pack. So moving through to the next one, which is resilience. Now, resilience means that you can show reliability and resilience in difficult circumstances, and you remain calm and confident and respond logically and decisively in difficult situations. So you're reliable in a crisis and you remain calm and think clearly. You sort out conflict. So if there is conflict, I'm going to highlight that, you can actually sort it out and you can actually deal with it. Responds to challenges. So you might want to say that, you might want to include that within your written report. It's important that we respond to this challenge in a positive manner in order to provide a high quality level of service to whoever it is you're dealing with. Deals with difficult emotional issues and then moves on. Manages conflicting pressures and tensions. Maintains professional ethics when confronted with pressure from other people. Copes with ambiguity. Resists pressure to make quick decisions. I'm going to highlight that one. And again, if you're actually creating your written report or your proposal and you don't feel it's time to actually make a decision without gathering further information, you could put that within your report and say, in this situation, I'm going to resist pressure from making a quick decision until I've established further facts about the case. Therefore, I'm going to interview X, Y, and Z or another person before making this decision. So you're being resilient in your actions. Remains focused and in control of situations. So you need to be in control. You're not going to create a report that goes, well, can you let me know what you think we should do? That's not taking control. You're going to take control and you're going to solve the problem. Makes and carries through decisions even if they are unpopular. And if a decision that you were going to make during the report writing process was unpopular, then you could put that in. I think in this case it's important that I carry through this decision and I am resilient even though it is an unpopular decision to make. Stands firmly by a position when it is right to do so. So that is the core competency of resilience. Now we're going to go on to respect for race and diversity. As with all the core competencies, this one is very, very important. So, considers and shows respect for the opinions, circumstances and feelings of colleagues and members of the public, no matter what their race, religion, position, background, circumstances, status or appearance. Understands other people's views and takes them into account. So you're tactful and diplomatic when dealing with people, treating them with dignity and respect. Remember that your role is the customer services officer. Therefore, you need to provide a very high level of service and you're going to be respectful to everybody. So in the report, you may want to say that you see issues from other people's points of view. Say you're trying to solve a problem or come up with a proposal where there's conflicting information between two parties or two people. You may want to put in there, in order to come up with a suitable solution, I am going to see the issue from each person's point of view. By saying that, you're actually focusing on part of that core competency. You're polite, tolerant and patient when dealing with people. So you're not going to go in there in your reports like a bull in a china shop, saying that, we can't accept this is wrong, being aggressive. You don't. You're going to be calm at all times and patient when dealing with people, treating them with respect and dignity. Respects the needs of everyone. And you could say in the report, in order to provide a high quality level of service, it's important that we respect the needs of everybody. Shows genuine concern and sensitivity to people's problems and deals with diversity issues and gives positive practical support to staff who may feel vulnerable. If you are dealing with a diversity issue or you're required to during part of the report writing process, then you may need to mention about the equality policy or certain diversity issues and providing practical support to whoever it is that you're dealing with. makes people feel valued by listening and supporting, uses language in an appropriate way, identifies and respects other people's values. So again, you could highlight that. I'm going to identify and respect other people's values, using keywords within the written report. Understands what offends other people and adapts your own actions accordingly. Respects confidentiality. I'll highlight that one. You may have to deal with a situation where it's respecting confidentiality, and if it was me writing a report, I might put that in there. We need to be able to respect confidentiality in this situation, therefore I will not pass this information off. Delivers difficult messages sensitively and challenges attitudes and behaviour which are abusive, aggressive. If you don't communicate effectively and answer the question, it doesn't matter how good the report is, you will not pass. Now, step 5, the final one, is to actually include keywords and phrases from the core competencies within your report. Because you've actually used them, you've actually learnt them, then you can use them in reports. And it's not about writing them word for word, but remember, I said at the end, I'm going to take personal responsibility for solving this issue, and I'll keep you updated on progress. You're hitting a couple of core competencies there, which is what you need to do. Okay, so that's the 5-step approach. Now, take a look at sample written exercise 1, if you have this in front of you. You are the customer services officer for a fictitious retail centre. Your manager has asked you to compile a report based on a new pub that is opening in the centre. Your manager is meeting with the pub owners in a few days' time to discuss a few issues, and he wants you to write a report based on the information provided. The pub owners have requested that the pub is open to serve alcohol beverages in the centre from 11 a.m. until 11 p.m. So that's like normal pub opening hours, but remember that this pub is actually in a centre. So that would be the first thing that would jump out at me if I was reading this scenario. Yes, they are normal pub opening hours, but it's actually in a centre. That might cause me some concerns. At the bottom of the page, there is a survey sheet that tells you that, on the whole, the general public and staff are not happy with the idea of a pub being opened in a shopping centre because of perceived antisocial behavioural problems, littering and rowdiness. So, remember that you are the customer services officer, and part of that role, the core competency of customer service, is to provide a very high standard of customer service. It's telling you here that your customers are not happy, so that those people who've been surveyed and the general public and staff are not happy with this proposal because of perceived antisocial behavioural problems. Remember that you need to balance your customers' needs against the organisational needs. Do you think it would be fair at this point to say, no, it can't open at all because our customers have actually said that we don't want it opening? Some of you may say yes. I would suggest that maybe that would be a little bit unfair and jumping to conclusions. Remember, you do not want to jump to conclusions. So you've got to do a bit of a balancing act here. You need to think, yes, I've got to provide a high level of service, but I need to remain impartial. I need to take into consideration that the majority of people don't want the pub opening because of perceived antisocial behavioural problems, littering and rowdiness, but there's no firm evidence yet to state that that has actually happened. So you might want to think, how am I going to deal with this situation? Am I going to remain impartial? Am I going to balance it with the needs of the pub owners and also the members of public and staff? So it's your job to create a report for your manager stating what the main issues are and what your recommendations would be. So there's 2 parts there. You have to detail the main issues, so from the information that's provided, and then you have to state what your recommendations would be. So remember, you've got to answer the question. There's 2 parts there. Okay, the survey sheet for this exercise states, the following information has been taken from a survey that was conducted amongst 100 members of public who regularly shop at the centre and 30 employees. 60% of the general public and 80% of employees felt that the opening of a pub in the centre would increase littering. So most people feel that it would. 80% of the general public and 60% of employees thought that rowdiness in the centre would increase. So again, they think that rowdiness would increase. And I suppose you could say it's pretty fair for them to actually think that a pub opening from 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. in a centre. 10% of the general public and 10% of employees thought that the opening of the pub would be a good idea. So only a very small percentage of people. Now, as a customer services officer, you don't want to drive people away from the centre, but conversely, you don't want to be jumping to conclusions. So as you can see, you've got quite a difficult job to do. So Following our 5-step approach, which you're going to learn this before you actually go to the assessment centre, and you should use this whilst creating reports from the sample exercises that you've been provided with as part of the pack. So let's have the 5-step approach with us now. So the first thing is that you're going to read the information which you've done. So spent a couple of minutes reading that information. You'll need to actually read it a lot quicker than what I've gone through it there on the day, but once you practice these, believe me, solutions will start to jump out at you only because you understand your role and also the core competencies. Okay, so step 1, you've read the information. Step 2 is to extract relevant information from irrelevant information. So when I'm going through this, I'm going to actually highlight now the relevant information. So you are the customer services officer for sample exercise 1. That is relevant because you're the customer services officer. You've got certain duties and therefore you must be able to make decisions and come up with a recommendation to this problem. A new pub that is being opened in the centre, that is relevant because it's a new pub that is being opened. It's not open yet, but it's a new one. The pub owners have requested that the pub is open to serve alcohol beverages from 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. Now that is very relevant. It's relevant because from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. they're going to serve alcoholic beverages, and immediately that jumps out to me that that could be a problem, and we know it's a problem because of the information from the survey. The general public and staff are not happy with the idea of the pub opening in the shopping centre because of perceived antisocial behaviour, problems, littering and rowdiness. So again, that's relevant because these are your customers. You have to provide a high quality level of care, but also remember that part of your role is to actually create customers' needs against organisational needs. So you've got a bit of a balancing act to do there. And then state what your main findings are. That's relevant because that's what you have to do, and what your recommendations would be. So that, in my opinion, is the only information that is really relevant to this situation. So when you actually break down the relevant information from irrelevant information, there's not a great deal. Yeah, the information on the survey sheet, without reading it all, it actually just tells you that most people are unhappy. Most of your customers, you could say 80% of people are unhappy. Okay, so we've extracted the relevant information from irrelevant information. Now, what we're going to do is actually create the report now. So we're going to start deciding what recommendations I'm going to make. So if you think of that situation, what could be a suitable recommendation? Well, I would suggest more of a compromise would be a suitable recommendation. You could maybe reduce the actual opening hours for a period of time, say for 3 months, and let's see what happens. If there's no problems, then we could extend the opening hours. That way you're responding to the needs of the customer, and you're also responding to the needs of the person who wants to actually create and open the pub. Now, when you're actually creating your report, what you need to do is you need to structure it in a concise and relevant manner, and I suggest that you do that by 3 things. The first one is creating a beginning, then having a middle, and then having an end. Now, in the beginning of the report, I suggest that you write brief details about what the report is about. You should also provide brief details that relate to your findings. In this particular question, you're being asked to detail your main findings and recommendations. Therefore, you should detail your main findings during the beginning section of the report. Now, in the middle, again, you'll go on and you'll carry on to really get into your main findings and what your recommendations would be. Remember that you should include keywords and phrases that you've learned from the core competencies today. And also, for the next couple of weeks, you're going to start learning and reading these core competencies more and more, and they will start to come and sink into your mind, and they will become second nature to you. So you'll be able to say, yeah, I'm going to take personal responsibility. I'm going to balance the needs of the customer against the organisational needs. Now, in the end, you're going to provide a summary and a conclusion. Say why you've recommended that course of action. Are there any further recommendations? Are you going to take personal responsibility for sorting out the problem and keeping your manager or whoever it is you're creating the report for updated on progress? Okay, now if you take hold of the document which states creating a report using a beginning, a middle and an end. And what I've done for you is actually box it off. So I've boxed it off into 3 different areas, the beginning, the middle and the end. And you'll see that this report that I've created here is only really one sheet of A4. Now you may need to do a little bit more than that when you're creating your report, depending on what you're required to do, but you'll see that this information provided is relevant and it's concise. Remember that you're being assessed against effective communication, so I've boxed off a beginning, a middle and an end. So, sir, please find detailed my findings and recommendations in relation to the new pub as requested. So I've actually said there at the beginning, please find detailed my findings and recommendations. So what am I doing? I'm answering the question. So the person who's assessing the sheet could say, yes, you're actually answering the question that is required. The survey conducted took into consideration the views and opinions of 100 members of public and 30 members of staff who work at the centre. So that's part of the main findings. Whilst a small proportion of staff and public, 10%, felt that the opening of a pub would be a good idea, the majority of people surveyed felt that there would be problems with antisocial behaviour, littering and rowdiness. So I've actually detailed the main findings there, and I've done that concisely and quickly to the point. I haven't gone into detail and said that 10% want it, 80% of staff are a little bit worried and 60%. I've just actually detailed briefly the main findings. So you've answered the first part of the question. Now I'm going to go into the middle of the report, and I'm going to detail my recommendations, having taken into consideration all of the information provided. Now I'm saying that because that is part of the core competency. You've got to take into consideration all of the information. So I'm telling the assessor, I've taken into consideration all of the information that's provided. I wish to make the following recommendations. So you're actually saying there, I'm going to make recommendations, and you're making yourself answer the specific question. Now let's go through it. The level of customer service that the centre currently provides is high. So I'm saying that it's high. I know that we provide a high level of service, and it is important that it is maintained. So we're actually hitting that core competency of customer community and customer focus. It's important to take into consideration the views and opinions of our customers and staff. So you're actually saying there, meeting the core competency, it's important to take into consideration the views and opinions of our customers and our staff, and to see things from their points of view. So you'll actually notice, and these should be jumping out at you, that they're from the core competencies. So you can see why it's important to learn them before you go. I believe that there would be a high risk if we were to allow the pub to serve alcoholic beverages from 11 a.m. until 11 p.m, and that problems with antisocial behaviour could develop. So there, I believe there would be a high risk. So you're actually making a decision. You're being resilient in your actions. I believe that there would be a high risk. You could sit on the fence and say, I don't think there'd be a problem, or I'm not too sure what decision to make. That wouldn't be the right thing. I'm actually saying there that I think that there would be high risk. We have a responsibility to protect the public. Strong statement. You're taking responsibility, which forms part of the core competency, personal responsibility. We have a responsibility to protect the public. Strong statement, and to ensure that they are safe whilst in the centre. So you're providing a high quality level of care. Whilst it is important to initially obtain the views of the pub owners, so again, you're following the relevant core competency of obtaining the views of the pub owners as well, I recommend that the pub is only permitted to serve alcoholic beverages from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. and from 5 p.m. until 7 p.m. so as to reduce the risk of the above problems developing. That area there is where I have made my decision, and in my view, I've solved the problem. So that's part of my recommendations. I've actually made a decision, and that's what you have to do. Whichever problem that you're faced with, or whatever question during the report writing session, you have to actually come up with a solution. I've done that within one sentence. Okay, we're now going to come on to the end of the actual report, and in that area I'm going to say why I've taken that course of action. So you have to back up the reasons why. I have recommended this course of action, so you're saying it. I have recommended this course of action as I believe it is in the best interests of the centre, its staff, and more importantly, our valued customers. So you're actually saying there that customers are valued. That to me is providing a high quality level of customer care. This alternative course of action, so you're being resilient, you're solving a problem, would be for a trial period only, and providing there are no problems with antisocial behaviour, littering or rowdiness, we could look to review the opening hours with a view to extending them. So you're remaining impartial. You're meeting the needs of your customers, but you're also meeting the needs of the pub owners. And you're saying, look, if there's no problems, then we can look to extend it. Okay, Here I'm saying now, I am prepared to take full responsibility for monitoring the situation. I will keep you updated on progress. So you're actually hitting the relevant core competencies. So I will take full responsibility for monitoring the situation, and I will keep you updated on progress. So you can see that it's concise, and of course you could probably write that in 10 minutes. No problem at all. So if you practice between now and going to the assessment centre your report writing skills and making your report relevant and actually concise, you're actually matching the core competencies. That is very, very important. So we followed the 5-step approach. We've read the information provided in the exercise, and straight away, within a few minutes, solutions to the problem are actually jumping out. And that's what you will find. If you practice these, they'll start jumping out of you, and you can think, yes, I can actually deal with them. But you can only do that if you know the core competencies, you know your role, and you know the information contained in the Wesher Centre Pack. Then I extracted relevant information, and you'll see that I underlined or highlighted the areas that I thought were relevant. And when you actually go through it, there may not be a great deal that's relevant. So if you're provided with loads and loads of information, only pick out that information that is relevant. Then decide what recommendations you're going to suggest, or what actions you're going to take or recommend. So make sure you actually come up with a solution to the problem. Don't sit on the fence. Then construct your report in a logical and concise manner, which we've done with a beginning, a middle and an end, and make sure that you answer the question. That is very, very important. And then include keywords and phrases from the core competency in your report, which I've shown you how to do there. So really, it's simple, but only if you practice. That is the key to this. You must practice it. Now, one final thing. Really make sure that your handwriting is neat, it is tidy, it is concise, and there are no spelling mistakes, grammar errors or punctuation mistakes. I always say to students who come along on my police officer courses is if you're not too sure about a word, don't use it. I also say to practice writing a report and then give it to a member of your family or your partner and say to them, can you read that back to me? Now, when they're reading it back to you, if they struggle with any words, you can guarantee that the assessor will have the same problem. A lot of people now, like myself, I use computers all the time for typing. I don't really write that much. That may apply to you as well. If that's the case, go through all the sample exercises that you've been provided with as part of this pack and actually sit down and start writing. Because if you go along to the assessment centre and you haven't written for a while and you pick up your pen, within a couple of minutes your hand and your wrist will start to hurt, and that's no good. You need to sit down and actually know exactly what you're doing, and you need to prepare, and that includes writing. If you have problems with writing or grammar or punctuation or spelling, then I recommend you get a personal tutor. The job of a police officer or PCSO is very well paid. It's a long career. It's a great, fantastic career. You may wish to get yourself some personal tuition if you feel you need to. Okay, so we've looked at a sample report or a proposal. Now we're going to take a look at how to create a letter. Now, during this next stage, I'm going to actually show you how to create a letter. You may be required during the written test to actually create a letter in response to a question someone's put forward, or it may be in response to a letter of complaint. If that's the case, then you will need to follow a very similar process than what we've just been through with the report writing stage. So, as part of your pack, you will notice that you've got a sample letter of complaint. So if you get that in front of you now, we will read through it. Now, as part of your pack, you will have a copy of the sample letter of complaint. So if you get that in front of you now, and we will read through it. So it's from Mrs. Anonymous of Fictitious Street in Fictown. Dear Sir, Madam, I wish to make a complaint in relation to the service I received at your centre last week. I telephoned your main customer services desk to reserve a wheelchair as I was visiting the centre to carry out my weekly shop. My English is not very good, and I explained this to the receptionist as she appeared to be getting impatient with me when I was trying to explain what I wanted. She began to raise her voice quite loud when I asked her to repeat what she'd said. In the end, she hung up on me due to her impatience. Naturally, I feel extremely let down by the service I've received, and I won't be using your centre anymore. I believe that the receptionist should be told off for her poor handling of the issue and want to know what you're going to do about the matter. I look forward to hearing from you very soon. Okay, so the first thing is to read the information which we've done. So you're providing a response to this letter. So remember your role as a customer services officer. There's a few issues here that will jump out at you straight away. First one is the alleged low customer service that has been provided. The second one is there's a diversity issue, so there's a lack of respect for diversity there. The person wanted to ring up for a wheelchair, and then she's stating that she had problems with customer service. So there's those issues there, and she also wants to know what you're going to do about it. So if you were in that situation, you can imagine you wouldn't be very happy and you want to make a complaint, which is what she's doing. So using our 5-step approach, we've read the information and then extract relevant information from irrelevant information, which I will do now. So the first one is the person wishes to make a complaint. Part of your role is to deal with complaints. That's what you're going to do in this situation. I telephoned your main customer service desk to reserve a wheelchair. So she wanted to reserve a wheelchair as she was visiting. So again, there's an issue. Naturally, I feel extremely let down by the service and I won't be using your centre anymore. So you want to try and turn that around. This person is saying to you they're not coming anymore and therefore, that's the end of it. But you need to sort it out and try and turn it around by giving a high quality level of service. I believe that the receptionist should be told off for her poor handling of the issue and want to know what you're going to do about the matter. Now, in relation to that, that's not really for this person to state what the resolution should be. In relation to the receptionist, you will need to carry out an investigation. So you'll see at the bottom of the letter of complaint is details of your investigation. After speaking to the receptionist, she admits to becoming impatient. So that's key. She admits to becoming impatient with the lady because her English was very poor and it was a very busy day with lots of customers to serve. She says that the telephones kept ringing and she'd not had a break for over 3 hours. So there's two issues there. There's the fact that she's hung up and she's become impatient, so that's a poor level of service. But there's also a problem at the centre. She'd not had a break for over 3 hours. So you could say it's understandable in that instance that she was becoming tired, becoming impatient. But that is no excuse for hanging up on a customer. So you've gathered the information. What are we now going to do? So you'll see as part of your pack, you've also got a sample response to the letter of complaint. Okay. I'll read it out to you. Dear Madam, I am writing in response to your letter of complaint following the service you received at the retail centre recently. So I've got an introduction there. So I'm writing in response to your letter following an investigation into the complaints. You've carried an investigation which I personally conducted. I wish to apologise unreservedly for the poor level of customer service you received on that particular morning. So you've carried out an investigation, that's important. So you've gathered relevant information. Remember that you can't solve problems unless you've gathered the relevant facts and information. I personally conducted, so which, if I ask you now, core competency does that relate to? It relates to personal responsibility. I wish to apologise unreservedly for the poor level of customer service. So remember that you have to apologise as part of discriminatory. So that is respect for race and diversity. Coming on to the final one, which is team working. You're going to develop strong working relationships inside and outside the team to achieve common goals. So you work effectively as a team member. Now in this case, you're not going to so much use this during the written report, but you need to remember your role. If you're a customer services officer and you're responding to, say, the customer services manager, whoever he or she is, then you're responding appropriately because you need to be part of that team. So you understand your own role in the team. So make sure that you know your role, which is contained in the Wesher Centre pack. Actively takes part in team tasks. You're open and approachable. You make time to get to know people, cooperates with others and supports others. So in this case, you're going to be supporting the person who you're creating the report or the letter for. Offers to help, asks for and accepts help when needed, develops mutual trust and confidence in others, and willingly takes on unpopular tasks or routines. So that's the core competencies. Make sure that you learn them, and it will become more apparent as I progress through the remainder of this program why they are so important. You need to learn these before you actually go to the assessment centre, and I would strongly recommend that you use keywords and phrases from these within your written report. Now, as I've previously mentioned, the Wesher Centre pack is a very important part of your preparation strategy before you go to the assessment centre. So what I recommend you do is you get yourself a copy of the Westshire Centre Pack, and you can download it from www.policecouldyou.co.uk. So let's go through the document. You need to learn this before you go. This will help you to pass the written tests and also the interactive exercises, which also form part of the police officer and PCSO selection process. If you know this documentation before you go to the assessment centre, your chances of success will increase dramatically. You'll know this, you won't have to sit there reading it whilst you're creating your report. You'll know this information before you go there, and therefore you can answer any questions, or you can actually create your report in a sound and concise manner relating to the information if required. Okay, so you get an introduction. We're pleased that you've chosen to become an employee of the Westshire Centre, and we'll do all we can to ensure that you settle quickly into your new post. So you're assuming the role of a customer services officer. Now, in this pack they've provided centre information, operations department, customer services officer main duties and responsibilities, which is you, proposal document template. This is a template that you'll actually use when you come to create your written report or your proposal document, a quality policy statement, and the code of conduct. Okay, centre information. So it's information about the Westshire Centre. The opening hours are from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. on Sundays and bank holidays. Let's assume that you're being asked within the scenario that you're provided with to meet somebody on a Sunday at 10 a.m. You can't actually meet them at that time because the centre's not open. So therefore you'd have to relate that information back to here, the information that you've been provided with, and that's separating relevant information from irrelevant information. So you can see the importance of understanding and knowing this information document before you go to assessment centre. Access. The centre has a car park for 6,600 vehicles, good link roads from the local motorway and main roads, and their regular bus services to the centre. The nearest train station is at Sanford, and buses run every 15 minutes between the station and the centre. So you may need to know about access to the centre. If somebody wants to know, let's say for example that the bus services are down and somebody's wants to know how they get there, you could mention the fact that there's a train station at Sanford, and therefore they could use that facility. Wheelchair access. With spacious malls and wide entrances to all shops and stores, the Westshire Centre facilities are easily accessible to everybody. There are 200 designated car parking spaces for authorised badge holders. Wheelchairs are available from the main customer services desk without charge. So if you need to provide a wheelchair for somebody, then you know where they're actually available from. The shops. The Westshire Centre incorporates 156 retail units, including a large department store. Food court is situated in the middle of the ground floor of the shopping area, and it caters for all different tastes, and there's also a licensed bar. No smoking policy, so for the comfort and safety of everybody, smoking is not permitted within the centre, except in those areas specifically designated for smoking. Customer services desk. The main customer service desk is located next to the food court, and there are 2 other support desks within the centre complex. Our friendly customer services staff will assist with any problems. Medical facilities. The medical centre, staffed by a registered nurse and other qualified first aiders, is situated next to the main customer services desk. Now, the medical centre is available for use by staff and customers during centre opening hours, and the registered nurse has the facility to consult and, if necessary, arrange emergency appointments with a doctor at the local surgery. So if you know that information and you get an incident where somebody's come along to the centre, they've become injured, there wasn't anybody to assist them, you could say in there, we apologise for this situation, it is unacceptable, we do have a medical centre and there is a registered nurse who should have been there to assist you. So if you didn't actually relate the information back, then you're not using the information in the pack effectively. So you can see why you need to know this information before you actually go to the assessment centre. Now, the operations department provides customer housekeeping and security issues within the centre. The customer services team consists of 10 customer services assistants and 3 customer services officers, so you're part of that role, all of whom report directly to the ops manager. The customer services assistant works at the 3 customer services desks, providing information and assistance to visitors and customers. The customer services officer, which is you, is responsible for handling complaints, so you may have to deal with a complaint, and the more serious problems which may arise from anywhere on the centre complex. So you might have to deal with some problems, well, you will have to. They do not have staff supervisory responsibilities, but they do act as liaison officers between management, operations department staff and customers for all customer services issues. So you have to deal with the issues. The main desk is situated next to the food court, as we already know, and all 3 desks are staffed during centre opening hours. So if I was to say to you now, what are the opening hours of the centre, then you will be able to tell me because you know the information. If you didn't read it and you didn't know it before you went, you would struggle to complete the written proposal. Housekeeping. The housekeeping team consists of 20 full and part-time cleaners. They're responsible for cleaning all the general areas for which the centre itself has responsibility. There are 2 duty housekeepers who provide the direct supervisory cover. Security. The security team consists of 30 security guards and 3 security supervisors. They are responsible for the security of the building and property and for the security and the health and safety of customers and visitors within the centre. The number of security guards on duty at any one time varies from 8 to 20. So, for example, if you were asked by, let's say, a local school who wanted to come along and visit the centre with their children, there may be a health and safety issue that you want to make sure that they're safe. So you would have to say in that proposal possibly that you have 8 to 20 security guards on duty at any one time. Therefore, we have sufficient people to actually deal with the health and safety issues. So you can see how you can relate the information back to the proposal document that you're creating. The security team also monitor CCTV cameras, so you need to know that there's CCTV there because you may need to use that during your proposal. There are 8 at various places around the centre complex. Police. The Westshire Centre Police Station is located within the centre complex and it's not a 24-hour facility, but it does provide an easy access point for people using the centre who need to contact the police. 2 officers from the Sanford Division of the Westshire Constabulary are based at the station. They offer support to the security team and endeavour to respond quickly to requests for help from centre staff. Okay, we're coming on now to your main duties and responsibilities as the customer services officer. So, your responsibilities are to ensure that customers and visitors to the centre experience the highest level of customer service. If you don't provide a high level of service when creating your written report proposal, you're not going to pass. To receive, investigate and resolve complaints from dissatisfied customers. So you might get during the written report a letter of complaint. You certainly will during the interactive exercises, but you have to deal with that situation effectively. Complete accurate written reports of incidents, events and suggested resolutions to problems as and when required, which is what you're doing during the written report stage. To give advice to staff and customers in relation to the Centre's equality policy statement, ensuring that the highest standards are met for both staff and customers. Assist management to ensure safe working practices and provide a range of customer services to customers and visitors to the centre as directed by the centre policies, which include dealing with more serious problems, which you're doing during the written report, making tannoy announcements. So you might have to propose that you make tannoy announcements during your proposal, assist with lost property issues, providing information services and safeguarding lost children and reuniting them with a responsible adult, acting as a liaison officer between management, ops, department staff and customers for all customer services issues. Okay, you then have a copy of the proposal document template. Now what I suggest you do is once you've watched this programme is use the sample report writing questions and create a report using this document. This will get you into the feel of using the exact sheet of paper that you're required to use on the day of your assessment. Okay, now we're coming into a really important document, the Equality Policy Statement. So if I was to say to you now, what is the Equality Policy Statement for the Centre? You need to know it and you need to be able to use it not only during the written report stage if required, but also during the interactive exercises. So again, it's really important to learn it before you go along there. Now, this policy applies to all staff in their dealings with other staff and customers. What core competency do you think this relates to? That's right, it's respect for race and diversity. Very, very important, so you must know this. It is the policy of the Westshire Centre that no member of staff or customer receives less favourable treatment on the grounds of gender, marital status, religion, political opinion, race, sexual orientation, disability, or is disadvantaged by unjustifiable conditions or requirements. Discrimination includes harassment of a sexual, religious or political nature or on the grounds of disability. So you can't discriminate against anybody on those grounds whatsoever. Racial harassment is defined as any unwelcome or hostile conduct, words or practices or a series of such acts carried out on racial grounds. Harassment on any grounds will not be tolerated. In addition to requiring compliance with the specific equal opportunities legislation, the Wesher Centre takes all necessary steps to promote fairness and equal treatment. To this end, all procedures and practices are regularly reviewed and progress monitored. Any person who believes that a member of staff is behaving in a discriminatory manner or causing harassment to another staff member or customer should take action as quickly as possible. Suggested courses of action are: so the first one, you need to know these, the 3 courses of action. Ask the person to stop. In some cases, some people may not be aware of their actions and what they're actually doing. Then they should discuss the problem with an appropriate person, which could be you. So they may be raising the issue to you during the situation within the actual written report question that you're provided with. If you're uncertain about what to do or are not sure whether the behaviour constitutes discrimination or harassment, or if you're reluctant to make a complaint, you can seek advice from a customer services officer, which is you. You may have to decide within the written report stage whether a situation is actually discrimination or harassment. You will have to decide that. And then they can make a formal complaint, and you can complain in writing to the centre manager, and the centre manager will then investigate the allegations and take appropriate action. So you may receive a complaint from somebody about a situation and you have to come up with a proposal. Okay, so that's the Equality Policy Statement, a very, very important document. Make sure you learn it. And if I was to say to you, what are the 3 steps, or what does the equality policy consist of, you should be able to relay that information back. Now, the Code of Conduct. In order to ensure a safe, friendly and enjoyable environment for everyone within the centre complex, we ask that the following restrictions be noted and complied with. The following acts are not permitted: antisocial behaviour, including swearing, shouting, obstructions, dangerous or disorderly conduct by individuals, groups or gangs, the display of offensive notices or clothing. So somebody might be writing in to say that they want to display some kind of notice. If you think it is offensive or people may find it offensive, then you may need to relate to the Code of Conduct in your report and say, the Code of Conduct states that the display of offensive material will not be tolerated. Therefore, we cannot accept this proposal from the third party. You're being resilient in your actions by sticking by the Code of Conduct, but you'd need to relate your reasons why back to the Code of Conduct. No running, climbing or any misuse of escalators. No sitting on barriers, fences or railings. Inappropriate use of lifts. Rollerblading, skateboarding and skating or use of scooters. Cycling in any areas other than designated roads and parking places. No smoking except in designated areas. Can't use fire escapes except in case of emergency. Using or leaving of shopping trolleys in non-designated areas. Bringing of animals or pets except assistance dogs in all public areas. So you may get a situation where somebody writes in and they want to request that they bring their dog in. If the dog is an assistance dog, then yes, that is acceptable. But again, you need to relate it back to the Code of Conduct. No unauthorised selling of goods, leafleting, canvassing, busking or conducting of interviews. So you may get a company or say a media company contacting you to say that they want to come and actually do an interview at the centre. Would you allow them to do it? Based on the Code of Conduct, you would not do it. You may get some people who want to come, some charities, for example, who want to distribute leaflets within the centre. The Code of Conduct states that you can't, but if it is a charity, you may decide to allow them to, but relating the Code of Conduct information before you actually come up with your proposal. So you're going to have to make some tough decisions. No consumption of alcohol except within the licensed premise. No acts of vandalism or theft or blocking of access roads, routes or pathways. The Wesher Centre reserves the right to escort from the complex and deny future access to any person not respected the listed restrictions. The police will be asked to assist when appropriate. So we've covered a huge amount of information there, not only that relates to the core competencies, but also to the Wesher Centre pack. Now, there's a very good reason why I've gone through them both. During your preparation, you've got to go through them, you've got to learn them, learn the core competencies. So if I was to say to you now, Tell me about the core competency for respect for race and diversity. What are the key points of it? You should be able to say what they are. When you go to the assessment centre, you'll be making your life a lot easier. Okay, now that we've gathered that information, now let's take a look at how you can structure a relevant report and letter. Now, during this next section of the programme, we're going to actually get into the realms of creating a written report or a letter. So what we'll actually do is we'll take the time and I'll provide you with a step-by-step approach to creating an effective report or letter, and then you can go away and you can practice it. Now, I've created a 5-step approach to creating what I believe to be an effective report. Now, you've already learnt the Westshire Centre pack, you've already learnt the core competencies that are relevant to the role of a police officer. Now we're going to use that information and put it together in a report. So when you go along to the assessment centre, you're not going to be sat there thinking, what am I going to do? You can actually sit there and think, yes, I know exactly what I'm required to do, because you will have used this information and practiced it time and time again. Now, as part of your pack, you will have received some documentation, including a sample written exercise and also the 5-step approach that I'm going to go through now. So I would consider having that with you whilst I'm going through this information. So the first step is to read the information which is provided at the beginning of the exercise quickly and accurately. So you'll be provided with your question of what you're supposed to do and any relevant supporting documentation. So remember that you've only got 20 minutes. So you're going to create your report during that 20 minutes, but you also have to read the information. Therefore, you don't want to spend too long reading it. Some people read the information, they're trying to absorb it and learn it, and before they know, 10 minutes have gone by before they've started writing. You don't want to be doing that. Okay, I'd suggest that you spend about 3 minutes maximum reading the information. Now, you've received plenty of sample written exercises for you to go away and practice with as part of this pack. So there's nothing to stop you timing yourself for 20 minutes, turning over the sheet, looking at the question, and then creating a report using the 5-step approach. So read the information. The next thing is to actually extract information that is relevant. Remember, part of the core competency was to extract relevant information from irrelevant information. So when you read the information provided in the exercise, you'll notice that some of the information doesn't really have much significance. Write down which information is relevant and which information is not relevant, and then you'll be able to use your main findings and recommendations from step 2. Step 3, decide what recommendations you're going to suggest or what actions you're going to take. So it should be able to jump out at you at what you're going to do. If you've read the Westshire Centre pack and you've learnt it before you go, then the decision that you're going to make should become a lot easier or more apparent. So one of the police officer core competencies is obviously that of problem solving. If you're asked to, then you must come up with suitable recommendations. Don't sit on the fence, as I've already said, but rather provide a logical solution to the problem. If you don't know your role as a customer services officer, all the information provided in the Westshire Centre pack, you're going to struggle to actually come up with a solution. So step 4, you need to then construct your report in a logical and concise manner, which I'll come on to in a second. And you must also ensure that you answer the question. That is very, very important. When I say answer the question, depending what you're required to do, make sure you answer it. So if it asks you to detail your main findings and recommendations, that's what you must do. You would need to say that my main findings are X, Y, and Z. My recommendations are, and by using the words that are in the question during the report, that will prompt you to actually answer the question. Remember that you're being assessed on effective communication.